What originally wasn't looked at as an extremely important decision for DeMeco Ryans could end up being the best decision or one of the best decisions that he's made early on in his head coaching tenure. Let's get to know Matt Burke and talk about why Matt Burke might actually be a bigger resource than originally thought. Let's go inside the locker room.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too.
Welcome to the locker room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610, which is where I was joined by Texans defensive coordinator Matt Burke. Subscribe, like, ride along. Appreciate you for coming through. We are all in this together. And DeMeco Ryans, when he hired his staff, all of the attention, including mine, shifted to the offensive coordinator and Bobby Sloat. What kind of offensive system are we going to have? They interviewed Cliff Kingsbury. You wanted to get rid of the old BOB / Patriots system, and you wanted to shift to the Kubiak system, and that happened. And there's a lot of reason for optimism when it comes to Bobby Slowick. And on the other side of things, with DeMeco Ryans, because he's a defensive-minded coach, you automatically think, well, who cares who the defensive coordinator is? DeMeco's one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Why does he really need a defensive coordinator? Or why does it matter who he hires as defensive coordinator? He's not going to be doing much anyways. I know a lot of us said it, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us said it. But Matt Burke, after getting to talk to Matt Burke on In the Loop, my radio show on Sports Radio 610, and hearing people talk about Matt Burke and really kind of diving into his 20 years of NFL experience, he may end up being a bigger resource than you, me, anyone could have imagined for DeMeco Ryans, because throughout this process, you had some people saying, well, he needs a former, head coach so he can know how to handle in-game situations. Matt Burke has had the duty of being the challenge guy. The Texans are into analytics. Matt Burke has experience with analytics. Matt Burke has experience as a defensive coordinator. And Matt Burke is a historian of the system that DeMeco Ryans runs. Let's learn about Matt Burke. Let's get to know Matt Burke. And maybe at the end of this video, you will think, man, you know what? Maybe that hire, because that's where I came around. Maybe that hire was a little bit more important than we originally thought. Now, DeMeco has said he's going to call the defense. Matt Burke, here's Matt Burke talking about the history of this defensive scheme, his experiences, and a lot more.
If you really want to go back in history, the front part of this defense was really, I was kind of part of when it was established with, Jim Schwartz and Jim Washburn and some of those guys back in the Titans days, and then moving to Detroit and Philly. So when Saleh and DeMeco were in San Fran, they kind of had the coverage package that they like to use, and they married up the front. So I think when DeMeco was going through this process, I think he was looking for someone to marry up, someone that knew the front, that had the history with it that I did, help on that side of things as much as anything else. So that's really where the conversations started of my history with the front and the D-line and how we play. So I think that's kind of where I'm trying to just.
But it's also more than X's and O's. It's personalities, meshing, and all that stuff. How'd that play?
We had a lot of overlapping circles, if you will. JJ, there was just a lot of people that knew both of us pretty well, that we both trusted as sources, saying, hey, I think you guys would kind of connect. And so, and then obviously having the last 6 months or so to go through this process with him, reaffirmed that.
And he worked with JJ for a year in Arizona. I told him, when he joined us early in camp, I said, man, I would mention JJ's name at least 10 times in that interview. I do think it's interesting, though, when we think about, and I'm saying we because I'm not separating myself from it, but when you think about a coach hiring a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, you typically think, well, this guy's going to oversee the defense, this guy's going to oversee the offense, the coach is going to do whatever he does, yada, yada, yada. But a lot of times, complementary pieces might be what you need. Whether it's, a coach that's overseeing the offense, whether it's a coach that's overseeing the defense. Sometimes you get just pipelines of coaches, coming out of places, but sometimes, you just need a complementary piece. And Matt Burke appears to be one of those complementary pieces. Now, this is the thing, though, and this is where it gets interesting. So DeMeco Ryans has been coaching since 2017. He's a relatively young coach. He doesn't have a ton of coaching experience. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. He hasn't even been coaching 10 years. Matt Burke's been coaching 20 years. So he's been coaching more than 2 times as much as DeMeco Ryans. So when you bring in that complementary piece, you bring in the guy that has all that experience. How do you balance? Like, what goes into balancing everything that you can offer and all the experiences you've gathered and still being able to be a good resource for the head coach who brought you in? Here's Matt Burke talking about that exclusively on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610.
What's the balance between, maybe inserting yourself and saying what you know, and then also at the same time kind of trying to balance what DeMeco wants and needs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say it starts with his vision, right? Like, he has a very clear picture of what he wants the defense to look like.
Swarm.
Yes. That's another buzz, right? We got to check that off the checklist. So like, I think my role trying to serve his vision as a starting point is where it happens. He is, I mean, you guys obviously have spent time on him. He's awesome. He's an amazing person and human being. So there's no, we all have egos, right? Yeah. But there's no ego in the room in that moment to say like, I don't see it this way. And it's really more conversation or dialogue to say, hey, I've done this in the past, or what do you think here? Or, hey, how do you want to coach this? And it's really just a back and forth between the whole staff. So it can be I think if the personalities are different or don't mesh, it can be sort of a hard fit, but it's been really, really fun. Actually, I'm enjoying it. It's one of the most fun camps I've had, just with the buzz here too.
So the interesting thing for me, like when you hear dialogue and you hear stuff like what Matt Burke has said, is there seems to be a clear message from players, coaches, that there's a lot of conversation and there's a lot of dialogue. And look, they can be full of shit. And we could say a lot of times, like, there's people that have like problems at home, and those are the ones that on the surface, it looks like everything's perfect. So they could just be lying to us. But I tend to believe them. And the thing that I like the most is how they seem to be focused on the why. And the reason is because whenever a coach comes out and says, I explain to these guys not just what I want them to do, but why I want them to do it, it's a coach explaining himself to players. Instead of just saying it's my way or the highway, I run-ish, you explain stuff, and there seems to be dialogue. Now, does that translate to wins? I don't know, but it does seem to translate to the players buying in. Now, once they play games, is that going to last? I don't know. It's just hard for me to imagine a guy like DeMeco Ryans not being able to make this work and create some sort of a good atmosphere. And if sometimes he has to adjust and sometimes he has to make different hires, that's fine. But I really enjoy these coaches talking about the actual why and explaining themselves, because I think a lot of times coaches have egos. You just heard him say it. We have egos, but we're explaining, we're talking to each other, we're working as a squad. I'm bringing my experience to DeMeco. DeMeco's giving me his experience, and we're trying to mesh and we're trying to figure stuff out. Fluid situation. Right now, DeMeco's calling the defense. Is there a time where Matt Burke, maybe he trusts him to call the defense? Who knows? But that's where they're at right now. He also has experience, Matt Burke, in the analytics field. And he also has experience in clock management. Will analytics be something that he helps DeMeco Ryans with? Could he be a guy who gives him like stats? Could he be a guy who tells him when to challenge things? Here's Matt Burke, defensive coordinator for the Texans, talking about that.
I mean, we have a department here that does stuff. Again, I look at all that. For me, like, all my experiences, I just try to like offer up to whatever anyone needs. Like, I'm not here to like tell people how to do their job. I've had, like, when I was with Sal in New York, like, that was a very specific role that I was filling there. And same with DeMeco, like, even going through some of these scenarios, I just try to stand next to him and say, hey, thinking about timeout here, thinking about this. Like,
yeah, because you've done game management too, right?
Yeah. So just, again, I'm really trying to just offer up my services and say, hey, these are my experiences and things I've done and ways I've coached or jobs I've had or analytics stuff I've done. And if it helps, great. If it doesn't, then we move on. So
is game management something you're going to help with here since you've done it before?
I haven't had those like direct conversations.
Have you played Madden? I think that's I feel like it helps.
That's how you learn.
I feel like us millennials are better at game management. It's easy for me to say though. You know, I'm usually sitting there like drinking a beer and like, call timeout.
Yeah. That is specific experience in New York. being the guy to do that for him and saying all those things, challenges, changed my focus a little bit on stuff, obviously weekly, that I was preparing and how I approached the season. But it was a cool experience to have that kind of in my background.
So there you go. So we got the analytics, we got the defensive background, we got this. Seems to be a little bit, more to it than what we traditionally think when you think of a defensive coordinator. Of course, it's all going to come down to how the defense performs. And Robert Saleh is kind of in the same situation. He's basically in the bleep or get off the pot in New York, where they've brought in Aaron Rodgers. They have high expectations. But Robert Saleh, a lot of people believe in Robert Saleh. I'm a Robert Saleh believer. I like what he's about. I know him and DeMeco are buddies. That's one of DeMeco's mentors. They've always spoke very fondly of each other. And he's someone that Matt Burke knows very, very well. I asked Matt Burke what the biggest difference was between DeMeco and Saleh. 2 words: potty mouth.
Are they alike, Saleh and DeMeco?
I would say that their coaching styles are very alike. We're like very good teachers, and the way they approach a progression of how they see things. Saleh cusses a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah. You have to watch your cussing around DeMeco?
No, he doesn't bother me. I have to watch it right now. We're live, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't judge. He just lives his life his way.
I said he's the guy in college where if he's one of your teammates or in high school, you're at the party, you just finished a keg stand. As soon as he comes, you dab him up, but you're out.
I'll say this, like, it's funny. The one thing because I'm awful. I like cuss way too much, but the rare times that he does, like, whenever I hear
like when mom cusses.
Drop one, I go, oh man, he's really pissed.
Yeah,
he's
it's like when mom cusses.
Yeah, so it's effective the way he utilizes it, probably more than mine, just running my mouth.
So you heard it here first. DeMeco Ryans, not a frequent cusser, but a very effective cusser. What do you think of Matt Burke? Put it in the comments. Before we get out of here, though, let's hear about how crazy Matt Burke is. He's an adventure guy. He likes to climb mountains. He likes to hike with gorillas, all this type of stuff. This is a little extra, a little getting to know him beyond the field. This is Matt Burke, who, my goodness, this dude is something else.
If you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, you've skydived.
Oh, yeah.
You went hiking with gorillas.
Notice how he said that. Oh, yeah. Like that's nothing.
In Rwanda.
Yeah, Uganda.
Uganda.
Technically.
Didn't you propose to your wife there?
That's where we got engaged, yeah.
I mean, this is crazy.
And
what am I missing that you have done, just so our listeners know?
So I've done the Everest Trail in Nepal. I was supposed to hike the base camp. It was the year that they had the big avalanche, so base camp was closed. So I just did a little a loop on the Everest Trail. I've done Machu Picchu in Peru. I've been to Cambodia and Thailand. I've been to probably like 7 or 8 different countries in Africa. I went to Jordan a couple of years ago and hiked through the Petra and Wadi Rum.
So you're nut about it. Not a nut crazy, but a nut about it.
I'm enthusiastic.
So there's got to be 1 or 2 things on the list like that's next.
One of them is Patagonia, which, for us, our downtime doesn't match up with their seasons because we have that window in the summer, which is usually when I take my trips, and it's winter there and it's hard to like do some hiking in some of those mountains. So I do, and I actually just got back into it. I scuba dive a decent amount. When I was in Miami with the Dolphins, it was awesome. Obviously all those islands are closed, Caribbean, all that stuff. And then, so I'd love to like do some diving in the Galapagos.
He actually said he went scuba diving during one of the Texans breaks. He's an interesting dude, and he might be a little bit more important than we initially thought. A lot of people underwhelmed by the decision just because you didn't think it was as important, or you didn't, you looked at Matt Burke as a guy who called a defense like this in Miami. Sometimes it's about complementary pieces. Sometimes there's superstar players that they mesh better with complementary pieces. We all think DeMeco Ryans is a superstar. It's kind of a cross sport type of thing. There's some superstars who mesh better with complementary pieces as opposed to bringing in just a star-studded roster. And Matt Burke, maybe he's one of those guys. I don't want to say I'm 100% bought in, but I'm much more intrigued now than I was before. And it's just yet another thing added to the list of intriguing things for the Houston Texans heading into the season, which begins, very, very soon. Couple of weeks now, few weeks, and it will begin. Appreciate everyone for coming through. I am Landry Locker, Monday through Friday, 10 to 2, Sports Radio 610, and the Odyssey app. Also right here, the Locker Room, #1 source for Texans daily digital content. Be on the lookout for live streams, typically at 9 p.m. Central. Post-game shows, best post-game show in the world when it comes to the Texans, and exclusive interviews throughout the week. We're at training camp. We're at games. We're in the parking lot before judging tailgates. We're in the locker room, not this locker room, their locker room, interviewing players after and bringing you the exclusive content and making you think a little bit about them Houston Texans. No matter what happens when it comes to the Texans, we are all in this together. Appreciate everyone for coming through.
City too, landlocked, got the game in the headlock, localized every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2, plugged in daily digital on YouTube.